Jacob Blake, Kyle Rittenhouse, George Floyd. You heard these names in the media over and over and over again ad nauseum to the point you're pretty tired of hearing it, I'm sure, at this point.
Yep.
So our question today is, what is it that makes these names the big household names that the media chooses to cover? Why is it that these are the ones we hear when there's tons of examples of these kinds of stories going on across the United States that we never hear about? We have a guest today by the name of Andy who's chosen to remain anonymous. He's from the Texas area. He's a police officer and wanted to point out some very real example in his case of something that's been going on that he's dealing with that just doesn't quite fit the narrative, and maybe give us shed a little more light on why we're not hearing about this story. So I'd like to introduce Andy right after the intro.
You're listening to the Unframe of Mind show, the place to have the most mind-stretching, unprotected, intellectual intercourse of your life. Your hosts battle the forces of evil by lobbing fiery balls of truth, reason, and evidence over safe room walls.
Welcome back to another episode of the Unframe of Mind show. I'm your host, Daniel Wagner.
Hey, Anthony Treywick.
All right, and as promised, we have a guest by the name of Andy who will be joining us.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey, doing all right?
Doing good.
And you reached out to us because you had a special incident come up that kind of mirrors some of the other major stories we're seeing, but the pieces just don't fit in terms of the narrative. And I want to give you the floor for a little bit so you can kind of give us a little bit of insight into some of these kinds of things, and maybe we can kind of put our heads together and figure out why in the world your case didn't make the national media, but say George Floyd's did.
Yeah, this is actually about a year ago. Very similar case. I was looking at one of you guys' posts talking about, George Floyd and some of the new information that came out involving the narcotics, and what they ruled his death, what actually contributed to his death. And I started thinking about a case that I had that was very similar, minus the, some of the uses of force options. We didn't step on anybody's neck or anything, but everything else was pretty similar. We had in custody death and ended up being narcotics involved also. And that story never really got picked up. They tried to a few times, and the media tried making it work, but it never did. The public never really picked up and ran with it. We actually had two cases that same year within months of each other. One got a little bit more local attention than the other over ours, but that fizzled out fairly quick. It became more internal department drama than anything, than any kind of real news that anybody outside the department would see. But yeah, I found it interesting that these cases were very similar in facts, but aren't catching national news. There really wasn't a whole lot for the media to play on. And some of the arguments that we're seeing with George Floyd or Jacob Blake were similar. The defense, the family, and their attorney and the media tried making similar arguments, but a lot of that got squashed fairly quick with facts. Like we're seeing similar facts that we're seeing with some of these high-profile cases going on now, except ours wasn't as high-profile, and our facts kind of trumped that stuff fairly quick, which shut down the media, and they moved on to the next story.
So I like how you said that shut down the media. Do you think maybe the media in these cases, in these bigger cases, they have an incentive to make sure the actual facts don't come out because of the narrative they're running with?
Oh, for sure. If the very thing that is going to debunk or ruin your narrative, why share that?
Yeah, you're getting all these clicks and shit. People are reading your stories. People are eating it up. People are angry about it and reacting to it.
So
you're making a lot of money over it as from a media standpoint.
Well, so I understand that. So let me ask you this. So the two situations you were involved with, was there any cell phone recordings of either one of these incidences that were circulating on social media that you're aware of?
Well, the case that I want to focus on today, there wasn't, the one that was very similar to George Floyd.
Okay.
I've been involved in several other cases where deadly use of force is used. There was no cell phone. I'm pretty sure that somebody had it somewhere, but it never really made it to media. People posted on Snapchat, stuff like that, but it never really took off. The media couldn't run with it because our department was pretty quick with the fact. They put it out there, and actually the press conference, they laid it out there. They showed the video, they zoomed in, they explained the situation, and the media was quiet. I mean, our chief asked, is there any questions? And complete silence. Like, it was very cut and dry when we, put the facts out there and explained it. They're like, well, we can't do anything with this. So that was it. It died the next day. They had a press conference.
Wow.
It was big news that night because, the news got out of like, black male killed, this, and that. And when the facts came out, they're like, oh, all right, well, we're done here. They all packed up their stuff within immediately as soon as the chief was done talking and duked out. That was it. So
wow.
I think when we get ahead of the narrative, I think that's the name of the game now,
Yes.
which is a double-edged sword because you're now catering to the public who's demanding this information. And I understand where that's coming from, but when I say it's a double-edged sword is that you're putting out this information where you're kind of messing with the integrity of the case. It's like, it's the day after. Facts aren't, the investigation isn't fully completed.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're throwing out information that's can possibly taint the jury pool in their opinion before they even see the case. And that's why you see a lot of departments not put out information because they're trying to maintain the integrity of the investigation. And when people hear the full details for the first time, it's at the grand jury, in the jurors are seeing it for the first time, unbiased. They're coming into it with no preconceptions because they haven't heard really any of the facts. And then they get to see the entire picture all at once instead of the media feeding you little snippets and then people forming their own opinion before they even get to go be a juror. Juror.
I
think
totally
that's
see
something we really wouldn't even think about.
Yeah, I totally
Just
see the double-edged sword aspect of it. The fact that you need to honestly you need to get ahead of the media in some capacity to make sure that the story they decide to run with is not the right one, or you need to make sure you get your quote-unquote alternative facts out. Meanwhile, in order for somebody to get a speedy and fair trial, you do have to make sure that, you got to keep it close to the vest. Like you said, it's really hard to get a jury pool together of people that are unbiased and don't already know or think they know the details of the case. And for them to get a fair trial in that case becomes next to impossible by the time it reaches national news coverage.
And
status.
I think that's exactly what we saw with George Floyd. I mean, we were given the video, and then it seemed like as time went on, we started to see more and more information. And it's like, of course, you have talked to us several times, through social media outlets. And we've talked about this. People just need to wait until facts come out. But then you got a huge population that they don't want that. They demand answers. They demand, something immediately. So I'm hoping by you telling, your side of things, being in law enforcement, I'm hoping that this will reach people and make some sort of sense as to why you guys don't release so much of the the information right away. Because after talking to you, I never thought about that. I never did, and it also kind of makes me wonder how much of the general public doesn't think that way either. So
in that particular case. Immediately, I was involved in a shooting. Myself and my team were involved in a shooting where we're being shot at, and we're returning fire. And obviously, the outcome of that was a death and the suspect. And I mean, we worked on him. He was still alive for the moment, but he had just passed, and people were already gathering and yelling. He was unarmed. Y'all shot him for no reason. This and that, and there's a crowd forming around us. And I mean, before the scene was even cleared, it was still an active scene, and people were already yelling that he was unarmed and that he was shot for no reason.
And that's not the time or place for you to turn around and say,
I'm not explaining anything to nobody. I'm we're still working on the guy. We're performing first aid and try to get, ambulance in there and working on him, making sure everyone in the area was okay. There weren't any stray bullets or anybody else was hurt. Those things were actively happening while the crowd is, forming around us and yelling these things at us. And that's the case where the chief came out the very next day and showed the video, zoomed in on certain parts to show people what happened, and even showed a picture and the video of the gun being pointed at us and, the gun on the ground. And well, that right there just killed the story of an unarmed black male being shot.
So I wonder if
you have clear video of the whole incident and the weapon.
So if you didn't have the video, you're dealing with eyewitness testimony in that point, and how many people are
that could get ugly.
Honestly thought there wasn't a weapon, and that's how they saw the whole situation, and that's how it went down, and will speak confidently on that. Like, yeah, absolutely, he did not have a weapon. There was no weapon there. B, how many people, given all of the mainstream media coverage we've seen, have a incentive to go, oh yeah, no, he didn't have a gun, even though they specifically saw he had a gun. Because we've seen many stories like that come out where people will specifically lie. People will attack a Trump supporter, for example, and then as soon as the cameras turn on there, they're all like, I didn't see nothing, or it was self-defense. No, whatever. I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't see nothing.
Yeah, that is crazy. So, Andy, let me just ask you, because I've always been kind of curious to ask somebody that's in law enforcement. I've got other friends of mine that are, but with you and the situation you went through, do you remember that day, kind of that morning, or whenever before your shift starts? Kind of walk us through what that's like, a day in the life of a cop, with given everything going on in the world right now. Just kind of give us a play-by-play of like, what is life for you when you get up and you get dressed? What are some of your thoughts that cross your mind?
As patrol, as soon as that uniform comes on, not even the entire uniform, just putting on the vest and, piece by piece, you begin this transformation in this thought process. You start becoming that officer, because, essentially it feels like, you're about to go face the unknown, and the unknown is our worst, which is, some sort of deadly force conflict.
Mm-hmm. Sorry to interrupt. For me, the moment I zipped the pants up would be the moment I switched.
Dude,
switched
come on.
Yeah. And as soon as, getting dressed, you become, like they even say that, like, just putting on the vest, you're I want to say adrenaline, your alertness starts to go up. Because essentially what you're doing is you're putting that target on.
Yeah.
Everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows what car you're in. You're very visible. There's no question of who you are when you walk out into the street, walk into a store, a coffee house, or, driving around. So immediately you feel all eyes on you.
That makes sense.
In the back of your head, you're stepping out with the worst in mind. Like that day could be today. But you also try to maintain some form of normalcy, so you don't kind of lose yourself and waking up like that every single day. So you almost have to have some sort of balance of relaxed normalcy, so you don't, you're not overwhelmed by the idea of like, oh man, I'm about to go face danger, and you're not on edge.
So like in some cases, you might feel like you are safer in your civilian clothes. You almost feel safer in some aspects in your civilian clothes. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah. You're you're just somebody else in the population.
Right.
The moment that uniform comes on, you're no longer you, essentially, in the eyes of the public.
Now you're a cop.
You're the state. Yeah.
You're the state. Yep.
And so,
And personally, I have a hard time. It's part of what comes with the mindset of being an anarchist. I'm sure we've interacted enough that you kind of know where I'm coming from, and I try to make sure I have a clear distinction between the rank and file officers, the rank and file teachers, the rank and file, anybody that's like at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. I try to make sure that I'm not including them in my view of the evil of the state. You know what I'm saying? I don't think all of the people that are working within the confines or the purview of the state are of themselves evil, but unfortunately, you have a lot of people like the ACAB acronym I see, which I just found out what that means yesterday. I'm like, just this wide generalization that all cops are bastards.
Yeah.
I'm like, that never even crossed my mind. So I kind of get where you're coming from, especially with everything heating up. It makes sense that once you put on the uniform, all of a sudden you're just another, representative of the state. You're just another cop. You don't have a family and kids to go home to. You don't have an individual personality at that point. You're just another asshole that's here to oppress, people of color or whatever it is. A lot of people really feel that way.
And it's funny because I've always thought, surely to God, majority, if not most, all cops don't wake up, every day wanting to go off and kill people of color or kill anybody just in general. I mean, that's just, I have a hard time believing that's somebody's mentality when they wake up, every day and they put on that uniform. I just have a hard time believing that. And it's one of the reasons why I don't really buy into this whole narrative that this is a race war between, blacks and cops. I just don't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Getting ready, for work every day or, on the days that I'm working, it's really taking on this mentality of, there's this element of like, man, what can happen today, or is today the day that I, meet the fight of my life? It's really most of the time it's, am I going to be the guy today? And what I mean about that is, I'm always ready to be that guy who needs to save somebody or has to confront the evil. And, I always have to be that guy. I need to be the, that sheep. I know that term gets thrown around, sheepdog, and because I do have military background. I do feel like my training and, a lot of that really helps. And, that mentality really helps in my job. Because I feel like I am either more so capable than your average citizen to be able to handle with certain evils. So it almost feels like it is my duty to take on those burdens of dealing with certain threats or dealing with certain situations. It's basically a constant head check. Like, hey, are you ready to be that guy? Are you ready to step up when it's time to punch that clock and earn your paycheck? And just kind of getting that right mindset. Like, hey, if shots are fired and you got to run to that school, is your head in the right place? If you, and that's dealing with, active violence. The other side of things that people don't talk about with law enforcement is, am I ready to deal with, the child that just got, molested or physically abused? Am I ready to switch on that professional side of me and in a way kind of suppress my personal emotions on it? I know that's a very difficult case to handle as a police officer, even a person, that in order for that kid or that family to get justice, I have to shut off certain emotions about myself to build a strong case to then later pursue their violator.
I'm not sure why that never crossed my mind. It seems so obvious, but when most people hear about, like you said, child molestation is a very sensitive, very emotional subject. Hell, Anthony here, just the idea, like we had a discussion the other day and you're like, I got basically talking about, I got a 9mm bullet for that, that
45, not a 9.
Sorry, 45, whatever. And it's like, that immediate emotional reaction. And a lot of people would follow through with it if given the opportunity. To be an officer in that case.
Yeah, I just
like, how hard must that be?
I guess it's because it's the innocence of a child, and there's just something about knowing that is just pure evil in the most. In the biggest form ever, to me, in my opinion.
Some kind of primal urge that you really got to try to...
if I'm not going to kill you, I guarantee you, if you go into jail, they're going to take care of you one way or another. It's just kind of how I see it. But that is where I kudos to you for having that, mentality to be able to shut that down. I don't think mentally I could ever do that. I don't think it's even in my capacity, and and it's not suggesting that I would, but because I've never been in that situation.
Boy, would it be hard.
But man, like I said, kudos to you for being able to ring that back, but let me, and kind of on that subject too, when you go into every situation, we often talk about everything that happens with law enforcement is a split-second decision. Give us what that's like to the best of your ability of having to draw your gun or taser and
make that decision.
Yeah. If there's a way that you can, explain that to people or kind of shed some light on what that's really like for cops.
Yeah. Well, even from just working a normal call that doesn't end in, a shooting or anything like that, that can be, being at a domestic and, everything's calm. Yeah. Well, you got either party a little bit agitated, they're kind of cursing at each other or at you. You try to place yourself in a situation where you're not taken off guard, and all of a sudden somebody wants to lunge either at you, your partner, or the other spouse, to be able to make that decision to jump on it and intercept it. And I think you're, as an officer, you're always playing out scenarios and you're ready for it. I call them file folders for the mind. We're constantly playing out these scenarios. Okay, if this happens right now, or if, say I was at lunch or I'm on this call and this person does this, we challenge ourselves. Like, what if I got to draw my weapon on a 14-year-old who's pointing his weapon at me and is showing intent to kill me? Can I make that decision of knowing that, this is a teenager, but yet at the same time wants to take my life? And you work through those moral dilemmas and those actual dilemmas of the tactical side of the actions of like, okay, well, where do I need to be placed? How do I reach my weapon? Can I reach my tourniquet? Or hey, like, what if there's an accident right here and someone's impaled? What do I do? We kind of run through the scenarios constantly so that the mind has a file folder to revert back to, so it closes that thinking and reaction gap and makes it a lot quicker. It's when you don't have a reference or a file for your mind to go to that you kind of run into that either panic or non-action. You just freeze because the mind is racing and trying to find some sort of context. It's like, I've never seen this before. What do I do? That's why reality-based training is so important, of actually having role players and acting things out, or dealing with people, with trauma and fake blood and all that, because it gives the mind a file to revert back to of like, okay, I've seen this before. I know exactly what to do. And it speeds up that reaction and that thinking process. So really just thinking about the scenario and playing it in our heads shortens that. Now, what that actually looks like, from my experience, I've been in several deadly force conflicts. My first one in this job was a shooting where I was going after a robbery suspect. The call details came out saying that somebody was just robbed. They gave a description of two black males. One of them had no shirt, black shorts. The other one, no shirt, khaki pants. He was robbed at gunpoint. They were doing some sort of like online sale. I think somebody was buying shoes or something like that. And the buyer basically robbed him at gunpoint, shoved a gun in his face. And, he took off. And my general direction, I was actually working a part-time security at those. I was in full uniform, but I was working for the apartments in a patrol vehicle. And I heard the details come out, and it's like, well, crap, he's headed my direction. So, he's either going to run into us or we're going to run into him. So we need to get ready. This was in the, dead of night. There's nobody out. And the one person we see is the one person matching that description. So in the back of my head, I'm already thinking, man, this is him. So, there was nobody in that area. It was in the dead of night. And the one person I see walking in the general area where the victim said his robbers ran to, was this guy that I saw. So I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm already, like I said, you're playing that scenario. Like, all right, hey Andy, this is it. This is probably your guy. It's about to go down. Like the chances of it happening are pretty high.
And you kind of have to assume it is your guy for the most part until otherwise it's clear that it's not. Or I mean, how do you? Because I'm just trying to think. You know, there's a good chance that it's not your guy, and this happens all the time. But how do you? What do you do in that? I'm sorry.
It's best to play it safe and just assume that this
it's
is going to be your guy. You can always. It's easier to de-escalate and come down in force and posture than it is to escalate.
Okay. No, it makes sense. It does make sense. It kind of sucks that that's the way it has to be, but it does make sense that it's easier to go ahead and just assume the worst.
Do you think that's where they get profiling?
And be mentally prepared for the worst? Because at this point in your story, I honestly don't know where this is going. I don't know if that is actually your guy or not, but you know, just contextually from your story, I'm kind of sensing that it turned out it wasn't your guy. But I'll let you continue telling your story there.
Yeah, and it's I'm not out here just pulling random black males to the side and talking to them like, no, he's wearing the black shorts, no shirt. He's in that general area where the victim just said he ran to. So it's not just it's random. I'm putting certain pieces together that match the situation, and that's what's setting off all the bells and whistles in my head, telling me that this might be him because X, Y, and Z are matching up.
Right.
So the probability is going up. It's midnight. There's nobody out, and the one person that you do see is someone who was just described by your victim, in the general area and all that. So I did have a partner with me, working that part time with me.
Sorry to interrupt again. First of all, what the hell is somebody out at midnight doing an online shoe trade, like what Craigslist shoe trade at midnight?
Yeah,
like come on, man. How stupid can you be? First of all, like I'm not victim blaming here, but I'm victim blaming. Like, dude, come on, use your head,
And to give context here as to that deal that went down that caused the ag robbery. The victim was from an affluent area. He came down to a pretty rough side of town to make an online deal.
Naive as all get out. Naive as all get out. Oh my God.
So
they see that and take advantage of him, which caused that situation. All
right. So you see this guy and you're heading toward him.
Yeah. And I see him and I'm already anticipating certain reactions. And it's fight or flight. Those are the two reactions I'm expecting. And I got to be ready for it. So immediately I'm, trying to turn on my body cam because I'm already thinking like, man, this is going to turn ugly. I need, I got to make sure my body cam is on and everything's straight. Make contact, but I'm trying to keep the contact. I'm trying to keep the tension low, even though I'm ready. And I got my gun out. I'm trying to keep the tone of like, hey man, let me talk to you for a second. Like, just roll calm, nonchalant, but I'm ready for that fight at any moment's notice.
Sorry, you said you already had your gun out?
As I was getting out of the car, yeah. And
okay.
I'm making verbal contact with him. At this point, my partner already jumped out of the car before I was able to do anything, which already put me on edge because she jumped out and I'm like, crap, I got to get out there with her. She doesn't even have her gun in her hand. I got to call out on the radio. I haven't really been on the side of town. So I'm looking for the address real quick on the computer. And I mean, I'm throwing the address out there fast. Like, hey, I think I'm with the guy. I'm at this address, blah, blah, blah. And just throw the radio down to the ground because my partner's already approaching him empty-handed, trying to make contact on what can be somebody who just pointed a gun at somebody who showed violent intent to somebody else. So I jump out of the car to hurry up and get with her. And as soon as I do, I immediately pull my weapon out, down to the side. I had it at the low ready. He wasn't facing me, but I'm like, hey man, I need to talk to you. You mind stopping talking with us? And this all happened within 2 to 3 seconds. So I'm telling this story, and it seems like a very long story, but this is happening within seconds.
There's just
So
so
I'm
much
approaching, I didn't even,
detail in all this, you know?
yeah, and imagine this is what the mind is processing within a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
I didn't even flip on my lights to my car to make the stop because I knew that that was going to induce that fight or flight reaction, which I didn't. I didn't want either. I didn't want him shooting at me as I'm still sitting in my car, because we call the car a coffin, because essentially that you're trapped. I didn't want him running because now I'm chasing a potentially armed suspect who could turn a corner, wait for me as I'm giving chase, and then just shoot me as I make that corner. That's happens more often than not. That's the big dangers of a foot pursuit with an armed suspect. So I wanted neither of those situations to happen. So I chose not to turn on my overhead lights on the car to induce any of those reactions. Again, got my gun out ready at the low, but I'm like, hey man, can I talk to you for a second real quick? Just kind of real minimal, a real low tone, nothing too amped up. And as soon as he turns around, he's got his hands in his pocket facing my partner. I'm like, hey man, go ahead and take your, again, I see the potential threat, but I'm trying to maintain that posture and that tone of trying not to get that reaction out of him. So like, hey man, just go ahead and take your hands out of your pocket for me. He just kind of looks over at me. Like I can tell he's thinking. He's trying to calculate what he's going to do. He looks at me. He looks at my partner. And then he starts walking away like, hey man, get your hand. At that point, I'm no longer being nice. I'm yelling at him. I start raising my weapon. I say, you need to get your hand out of your pocket. And so I don't know if he pulled his hand out before I finished that sentence or right after, but he starts pulling his hand out. And all this is happening to me in what seems like slow motion. Mm-hmm. I even remember thinking, like, why is he moving so slow? It blew my mind. Yeah. And it wasn't actually happening in slow motion. My mind was processing it that way.
I hear people in high stressful situations like that talk about everything seemed like it was running by in slow motion, but to hear it actually described again, that's like, I can't even imagine, but I get where you're coming from. Like everything just seems like your brain is on fire. You're going bap, 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 and just thinking, what's the next step? What's the next move? What do I need to do? What's he doing? What is my partner doing? What, is there anybody else around that might,
It was, I had this whole conversation with myself in those like fractions of a second. And that conversation was, as he's pulling his hand out, I see something metal. The victim described the weapon as a small gray or silver handgun that was shoved in his face. And when I see his hand coming out of his pocket, I see a metal gray object in his hand that's fairly small, the size of a small revolver or pistol. So already that's another check in the box that's meeting the criteria of what I'm looking for. Like matching the description, he's in the general area, he's pulling his hand out with what looks like the same description of what was given by the victim. So I'm already like, crap. I'm already thinking like, what is that? What is that? What is that? And it almost felt like I zoomed in, like everything got enlarged. I felt like I was like 5 feet from him, looking at his hand with a microscope, because that's how big it looked like to me. And I remember telling myself, what is that? What is that? What is that? You got to make sure it's a gun, make sure it's the gun, because already in my head, I'm thinking, crap, I'm going to have to shoot this guy. And I'm already thinking about the media. I'm already like,
see, now that should not even come up in your head as another angle you have to think about. How is the media going to spin this? Is my entire life going to be ruined because this guy's black and I'm not? We haven't even mentioned your ethnicity whatsoever. I should say you're not a white guy. So, I mean, that does work to your advantage. So,
you're racist.
A little bit, but, if you were just a straight up white guy, that probably plays an even bigger factor in your decision making in this situation. It's sad. It shouldn't, but it does.
And my partner wasn't white either. So that's another fact that probably a factor why the media didn't run with that story as hard as they did, or why it didn't get picked up. But in my opinion, along with the facts. But in my head, this whole story is playing out in my head of like, crap, the media's going to pick it up. What's going to happen to me? Am I, going to get fired? My family and the exposure. And he's like, you better make sure, Andy, you better make sure. And I'm like, zooming in. I'm like, what is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? And I like, as he's pulling it out further and further, the anxiety is getting to me, because there's a line the point of no return, and you could only analyze so much, up to a certain point. And if anybody knows anything about Dave Grossman, Lieutenant Dave Grossman, he's a military psychologist, and he has 2 books called On Killing and On Combat. And one thing he talks about that you start to have diminishing returns in certain situations like that. Like you could only take in certain information before you have to make a decision and act, right, or not act. Basically, you could only take in so much information. After that, you have to make a decision based off of what you have. No new information is coming in. That action is that situation's progressing to a final point, and you need to make a decision before it gets there, and you have to live with whatever happens next. So I knew that point of no return was coming, so I had to make a decision quick. He pulls it out. The final driving point that made me pull that trigger of finally deciding, okay, this is it. I'm pulling that trigger, was when he started to pull it back. He started raising it at my partner, and I could see his body language kind of bracing himself, which would appear to be a blast. So that the body language, along with his arm being, raising the object up at my partner like a handgun, is what drove me to shoot him. And then I shot twice, and after the shot, I don't know if it was the first or the second shot, time sped back up. It felt like time was a rubber band being stretched, and it was slowed down. And then when those gunshots went off, that rubber band snapped, and time just came back together and went back to full speed, which was a very weird. It was a very weird thing to go through. And you asked me, like, what does an officer go through when you're making those split decisions? That's what was happening when I was making that split decision. I did the interview. They're asking me, hey, how close do you think you were to him? I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet. I felt like I was right there on top of the guy. Okay, they're taking my statement. And after the investigation was done, they got with me and they kind of showed me a lot of the facts and forensics and everything. And I was told, I was like, you weren't 5 or 6 feet from the guy. You were 33 feet from him.
Wow.
When you took that shot. And also trying to finish the story, that shot went, the first shot went through his back was a little bit to me, kind of angled at me, because he was turning back at my partner, and I was off to the side of my partner. So that was another thing I was worried about, like, oh, well, he was shot in the back. They're going to say, oh, he shot someone in the back. Well, yeah, I shot because that's what the target, the target area that was
available
facing me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he wasn't a threat to me. He was a threat to my partner.
Yeah.
He wasn't. Yeah. He was shot at that angle by me because the threat was to my partner. She had just a flashlight in her hand, no weapon. So she was out in the open. And she, afterwards, she did admit to me that, like, well, crap, what was I thinking? I didn't have my gun in my hand. But I was already there, and the experience between us was pretty vast. I had a lot of experience on the street and my combat experience, so I was already seeing things that she wasn't. So I don't know if that attributed to why she didn't have her gun ready. I mean, you're about to approach a violent suspect or potentially violent suspect.
I got a few questions. I'm trying to keep them in my mind here. But first of all, you always hear about, well, protocol says you should do this to slowly escalate the situation. You should pull out, basically you should pull out your taser first and try that. And if that doesn't work, then you pull. And I'm trying to think, okay, there are situations where the officer already has their gun in their hand, and when everything, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you're already assuming this guy, maybe it turns out he was just had a pack of cigarettes in his hand that he couldn't quite, he was just trying to get his hand out of his pocket. Maybe you were already biased in the situation and thought, oh, this guy's, I'm reading this body language that turns out not to be the case, and you just shot a guy because you already had your gun in your hand and that was your first initial reaction. There's so many different situations that could come up out of that. I'm just curious, just, from your perspective, why didn't you start? Is there a reason you went for the gun first or not a taser, some other form, or, you felt like the situation already warranted a handgun right off the bat? Is there some reason? What was it for you that said this is the course of action that's necessary in this case?
What made my decision and force option there was that I'm approaching somebody who is potentially my suspect, who is supposed to be armed.
Yeah.
So basically meeting them with the same force capability that they have.
So basically, don't bring a taser to a gunfight.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm just curious because I assume there's some kind of protocol for when you're supposed to bring out what tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and they can't make. There's not a lot of like hard rules, like, hey, in this situation, boom, you do this or you do that, because that takes away discretion, and departments understand the use of force continuum. It's not a clear, okay, you have this level, this level, this level. No,
right.
it's a continuum, and you can fall anywhere in between, and you can go from one end of the spectrum to the other end in a matter of seconds. You can go from one end to the other and back. I mean, that thing can go back and forth. I mean, you can be facing somebody who has a knife, you got a gun out, they put it down. Now escalation has, things have been de-escalated. They separated from the weapon. All right, you start to holster and try to approach the person. Now they start walking back towards the knife, then you go for the taser. You can go, the situation go back and forth in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, you're dealing with some erratic human behavior. You add in potential drug use on top of it. You don't know what's going on in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
They might be mentally handicapped in some way where they literally just don't know what they're doing. We've seen those situations come up. There's so many different factors that could play in, and you got to make a decision in a matter of seconds. Good luck.
Well, and that's something I've kind of alluded to in some of the posts that I've made on social media, is that everybody is faced with a decision. And it's the same thing over and over again. It's, everybody wants to resort back to race, but no, it's bad decisions that people are making in that moment that causes them to lose their life or potentially end up paralyzed, kind of like with Jacob Blake's. You didn't have to pull that gun. I wish people would stop and think before. Well, they're criminals, obviously they're not going to, but I would think a lot of this would tend to go away or minimize a lot of the situations if they just think just for a split second, man, if I pull this out of my pocket, I'm going to end up dead. It doesn't have to go that route.
Yeah.
That's what I keep telling people. I mean, if you're a criminal, you don't have to go this way. The guy would have gotten in trouble. He would have done his time. But hey, at the end of the day, he's still alive. And
now,
I just
to be fair, I'm also thinking from the position of this other guy, this suspect that you were coming in contact with. I'm trying to think, I'm a black guy. My whole life I've been told that, any interaction with the cops is highly stressful. I could lose my life right now. I could, there's racist cops everywhere. My only shot at getting out of this alive might be to take the guy out and run. Maybe there could be stuff like that going on. You got the whole mainstream media apparatus telling you every day, oh, look how racist cops are. Look how terrible they are to black people. And, you're a black guy going, oh, shit, I'm having an interaction with the cops. What the fuck do I do?
Well, and I think that's the gap here. I think that this is where there needs to be more improvement within, the black community, and then also, with your local police department, building those relationships. And, me and Eddie have talked about this before about, the area in which he patrols, and I think that's where it kind of starts from, but not everybody's going to have that same mentality or thought process about the cops, thinking that they're not going to get shot. It's just that I think that's where it needs the most attention is a situation between the black population and the police officers. Mm-hmm. What do we need to do to convince this group or, black people that cops aren't going to kill you if you just kind of cooperate with what they're asking? What do you do?
What would you think, Andy, would be a better, what would help you with your particular perspective and your particular job to make things easier? What would be some kind of a solution to this, I guess, is what I'm asking. I don't know if you have an answer or any ideas or suggestions, but I'm just kind of curious where your mind goes on that.
I don't know if I have a solid answer. I mean, it's multifaceted, really, and it, like Anthony said, it depends on where you live, but every city, every department, every has their own relationship with the community, which is why it blows my mind when people want to protest what happened in one city and go to a completely different state and protest that case, because it's like, we're not those officers. That's not even our department. Like, and I understand that the atmosphere in some states and some departments, some communities, there is a lot of tension, and there is a lot of history there of that tension with the community. But then people want to come to my city and voice their frustration with somebody else's department. I'm like, and a lot of local, Black, people from the Black community here locally are like, nah, that we don't have that problem here, or we don't think that way of our police here in this city. They see these outsiders coming to their city, their town, and creating all this havoc, when the local Black community, you do have some people who are anti-police, and I think that's everywhere. But I've had people from the community walk up to us during protests. It's like, hey, y'all do what you gotta do. Y'all get these these crazy people out of here. Like, they don't speak for us. They're not even from our city. They're not from our state. We don't have that problem here with you guys, this and that. So I think people lose sight of that, hey, that's that department, that's that city, that's every area, every region has their own culture, their own issues. And I think it should be addressed as such, and not this broad, like, we're not federal. Cops aren't federal. And I think we're getting looked at like we're some massive, like you say, oh, the cops, well, there's cops from this city and this city. They have a certain culture of handling things that may be good or bad. Or you have another city where they have a great relationship with their community, and Black community, and all that, and do a great job of protecting the community and fighting crime, and, having a friendly interaction. So it is a little weird to see that kind of thrown at you when your department is doing great. So there are departments that are ahead of the curve.
In the city that you work in, again, for the folks that are watching this, we're not releasing his real name or location where you work at, but in the city that you live in, what is the area of town in which you patrol? Is it, kind of the suburbs? Is it lower income housing areas? I mean, kind of give us an idea of what your patrol looks like.
So I've worked in several divisions, mostly in the inner city, low income, either predominantly Hispanic or predominantly Black. There are some pockets where it's a mix, and then you can kind of see it where there's no real like definite lines, but sometimes that does get blurred every now and then. But there are concentrations. But currently, I am in the suburbs because of the current climate. I transferred somewhere where there's low activity. Your normal suburb neighborhood, not a whole lot's going on. I'm answering loud music calls, and some, their neighbor parked their car facing the wrong way or whatever.
Wow.
That's where I'm currently at now. Most of my career has been in a lot of the high crime areas. I was in a tactical unit, which we were citywide, and we responded to things all over the city, which, if you saw us, it's a bad day. That means we're serving a warrant, we're going after a fugitive, or we're executing an operation with a federal or local agency, or even another unit assisting narcotics or something like that. So I've been in some pretty rough parts of town, which ironically, I actually feel more comfortable in those sides of town. And I don't know, that has to do with my background, because I came from areas like that, and I identify with people in those neighborhoods more. I feel like I can be more myself in those neighborhoods, but because of the climate, and because officers are being thrown under the bus and being fired left and right, knee-jerk reactions within the department, I removed myself from those areas, and now I'm working in a much safer, politically safe area of the city, which is sad. I hate to admit that. I'm not that type of officer. I'm not that type of guy. I like to go out there and be in the where the problem is. Like if somebody just got robbed, if somebody's running with a gun and there was a shooting, there's a gang shooting, there's a dope deal gone wrong, or we're looking for a child predator. Like I am the guy that wants to be there to capture these guys or deal with this situation. But that love's not being reciprocated. So if I'm out there and I want to do my job, I want to stop the evil, I want to go after the violent bad guys, but yet you're seeing guys like me getting thrown under the bus, treated unfairly in investigations, then it's like, well, then why do I want to put myself in that situation? And it sucks that I don't want to be that guy that has to be, that's sitting in suburbia watching the stop sign. But
well, I do understand that's a decision you've got to make for you and for your family and for, just society in general. It's just like, you wonder, people don't think this shit through. You got officers like you that are like, either I'm going to go to an area where I'm going to be less in the potential limelight here. The media pressure's gotten so heavy that I'm just going to play it safe and go over here and not risk my entire livelihood and family. And then other officers are, good officers that have been there for, spent their whole lives, they're retiring early or they're leaving and doing something else because it's just not worth it. Yeah. And then what happens is, what's left? Well, you got shitty officers, officers that are kind of mediocre but not that great. You got officers that are corrupt that are sticking around because they know the potential of what they can get away with. They know what their power is, and you end up getting even more of that. So the whole entire situation just ends up being a snowball on itself over and over and over again. It gets worse and worse and worse. It's not going to get better unless we change our direction, as a society, I think.
Yeah.
I hate that, man.
And I ask people, the only people that really had issues with me on the street are bad guys. The people within my department who have had issues with me are my upper chain of command. If I can describe my style of policing, it's very aggressive. I like to aggressively pursue criminals, crime and evil. I don't really care about, I think I still have my first ticket book. And I've been on the department about 6-7 years. And I haven't even filled out a complete ticket book. I turned it in, and it was unfinished. I think I only had like a quarter of it done from my rookie years when I was trying to learn the job and writing a few tickets here and there. But like I'm not interested in writing tickets and running radar and I am obligated to fill out some of these less glorified reports. Somebody had some money stolen from their purse or their car broken into, some CDs taken. That's the boring part of the job, which, I still do. It's part of my duties, but where I feel I fit in the most is when shit hits the fan. When shit hits the fan and even other officers are losing their shit and there's complete chaos on the radio, I'm the guy who is calm and can bring order to the chaos, to the scene, and start giving orders and start getting on the radio like, hey, somebody come in from the east, somebody go check this area, secure this perimeter, and let's get the team together. And, I need an arrest team here. I need a containment team over there. And I think a lot of that comes from my military side. I did 2 combat tours. I was in the Marine Corps, one to Iraq and one to Afghanistan. So I think that part of me starts to show in those situations. And I think that's where I become more of an asset. And that's what I mean about being, having an aggressive style. Taking command of a situation and actually using it towards things that I believe is honorable and worthy. I like to say that I arrested and taken down violent criminals, violent gangbangers, large dope operations. I've actually been involved in 2 kidnapping rescues where 2 little girls were kidnapped and sexually assaulted, and I was part of that team or group of officers who I'll use the word hunted down these predators and found them and found the girl. and I take pride in that type of work. And so, that aggressive policing isn't looked too kindly upon by my chain of command, because I get things done. And yes, I do use violence, but I use it very controlled and measured to the situation. And I tell people, whether it's on the street or family or friends, or even conversations like we're having now, people hear, oh, violent officer or aggressive officer. And I say this, like, hey, so say you're having the worst day of your life. You're in your home, someone's breaking in your house, or somebody just kidnapped your 8-year-old girl. Who do you want chasing those bad guys? Do you want somebody like me who's got combat experience, who knows how to tune in his aggression and go and find these guys? Or when you're in the back of your house and there's dudes breaking into your home who, multiple guys with weapons, do you want the guy who can harness that aggression and years of tactical experience to bust down your door and handle the threat, multiple threats in every room? Like you would want somebody like that. And usually the response is like, well, yeah, I want Rambo breaking down the door and coming saving my child, or saving me or my wife, or if my family is in a car wreck, I want that officer who's going to bust out the windows, cut off seat belts and start ripping seats out of the car and getting the family out of there.
And honestly, in a free society, there's a special place for guys like you, and they would be paid very well. Which brings me to another question: in terms of pay, versus the risk versus reward. Local officers out where I live, I was just talking to one that's been on the force for a while, and just bullshitting with him. I was like, "How much do you make, if you don't mind me asking?" He said $13 an hour. I'm like, oh, wow. $13 an hour? I could go to McDonald's right off the bat and make 10 and not put my life in danger.
I make almost double his salary.
Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not a great recipe for bringing on quality people that's going to be able to make good decisions. And I'll ask you the same question. I don't know what the local, living range is, but do you feel like you make a reasonable amount given the amount of risk that you encounter?
For the amount of risk, no. Now,
risk and responsibilities.
Risk and responsibility, no. We do, so much gets dumped on officers, especially the street level officer. We have thick packets that we have to fill out during family violence. A lot of it's detective work. We're filling out paperwork for the detectives on scene. I was like, man, we got to figure out what paperwork we got to fill out for the detectives to make their lives easier. We got to collect all this data from the scene, from our video, from our call sheet on the computer, and put it into this report and all these forms, so that the brass has this analytics to make their job easier to, figure out, their data and how to run the department. Which, yeah, I understand collecting data, but man, on scene when you're dealing with a dynamic situation, that's not the time to be sitting there and worried about, okay, well, what police cars are all here? What numbers are there? How many officers are here? All these little minute details, or certain responsibilities that they keep stacking on us. Make sure you call this person and this person and this person. And this supervisor knows what's going on, so he can contact so and so. I'm like, man, can we just deal with the situation? I feel like they just keep adding more paperwork.
Sorry, all the name of covering your ass, basically.
Yeah, and it's
what it sounds like.
To the point where you're more worried about, the admin side of things, and if you forget to label something, you get your ass chewed, or you get that Instagram email. It's like, well, that stuff can wait. We can find that information. A lot of it's duplicated work. Like, well, we need you to fill out this data in this form for this unit, and then that same information for this unit, and then the chain of command wants to know this information, so you got to fill it out there also. And so what could be a quick call turns into a 2-3 hour report. So you just taking an officer off the street for that amount of time because of the amount of crap all the hoops he's got to go through on just one call.
I've heard that, like, the defund police hashtag, which is a terrible hashtag because the the goal, from what I understand, is to take some of the responsibility off of you guys and put it in other areas to handle certain situations. And a lot of people on the right tend to get this idea: defund the police means, oh, we're just abolishing the police. And it's a terrible hashtag. But do you feel like you could, like, it sounds like, just based on what you're saying, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you could be more effective at your job if other people were handling the bullshit, the stuff that shouldn't really fit in your job description.
Yeah, you simplify the job. You have an officer who's, shows up to a call and already thinking like, all right, I got to get, as soon as he gets out of the car, like, all right, I need your last name, first name, date of birth. Hey, talks to his partner. Hey, can you go get their info? And immediately it becomes data collecting. All right, everybody, I need everybody's name. What happened here? Fill out the statement, as opposed to just showing up and dealing with the people first. Now, some officers are good about that. We had, officers who train, rookies who are good about telling them that, out of the academy, they come out as soon as they show up on scene, they pull out their notebook and they're like, all right, what happened? And they're writing things down. We have some good officers who train some of these rookies and who have trained me and told me, hey, put your notepad away, talk to these people, be aware, be present in the moment. Because one, you don't know what kind of threats are there. I know the call details say it's this, and this, but we don't have the full picture.
Right.
Figure out
and
the
every
full
moment,
picture, figure out what's going on.
Every moment you're spending writing in your notebook and looking down and trying to, you got your attention directed elsewhere when somebody could be. Like I had this image in my head of showing up on a scene and a dude is abusing his wife or something, and you're like, excuse me, ma'am, I'm going to need your first, last name, social security number and stuff before I can intervene here. Like it doesn't, I mean, I know it's an extreme, example, but it's like, it kind of gives me that picture of what you're describing is like, you need to go in there and handle the situation. It makes sense, go.
Yeah. And it definitely frees up the mind. And it's a principle that we follow also in the Marine Corps. That's why things in the military are very simplified. And it's not because our soldiers and Marines and service members are stupid. I know sometimes that joke gets thrown around at our grunts and our infantrymen, but things are simplified because we don't want to burden their minds with either overcomplicated things or we want things to be very simple, very standardized, so that when it comes time to act, when they can deal with a situation, their mind is free to do so. And they're not weighed down with, oh crap, okay. They're going through the checklist in their head, like, all right, I've got to get this information. I got to make sure I got this. What do I do in this situation? Okay. I got to do this. And I got to call this detective and I got to, make sure this gets done and get this timestamp. You get an officer who's very present in the moment and dealing with it then and there. And then he can, deal with some of that stuff later. But I actually believe we need, I don't know if more funding is, I think smarter funding. And
I like that.
Yeah.
I think more efficient funding, and the anger shouldn't be pointed towards the police. Point it towards your mayors and your council, your city council.
Yes, thank you.
Why aren't we asking our mayors and city council, what are you doing with my money? Why is there a $1 million statue or sculpture out in front of the library or in front of whatever building, but yet our officers don't have this, or our firemen don't have this system, or whatever. People think that the they like to tell police departments are,
wait a minute,
wasteful and they spend all this money on.
You're literally blowing my mind right now. Are you telling me politicians misallocate funds on the regular?
No.
Is that what you're?
Never.
Like, no, I don't believe that for a second.
That doesn't happen. Come on now.
Hey, listen, Andy. Oh, sorry.
I know we kind of need to wrap this up soon, but just a quick question. That's not really quick, and it's not really going to be a short question. So the situation, I just want your thoughts on this. Have you had a chance to see the situation with Kyle Rittenhouse? Have you been able to actually watch the videos of everything kind of transpired with that whole situation? And if you have, can you kind of give me your thoughts on that as far as if you think that's self-defense? Does this have a case? Do you think that the charges will stand?
Mm-hmm. I'll watch the videos. I haven't followed a lot of the stuff too closely. I've picked up some stuff here and there. This all this is pretty overwhelming, especially with my job. At some point, you just have to turn off and kind of stop taking in a lot of this information, because I still have to function with my daily life, especially with being an officer.
I get it.
That was a hell of a caveat.
So based off the information that I do have, to me, it appears like self-defense. Now, I've heard the argument of like, well, he was out there looking for trouble. He was out of state. He drove to another state. And my response to that is, I'm sorry, I didn't know I have to have a reason to be anywhere in this country.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can be anywhere in this country at any given time, and I don't need to tell you why.
For any given reason, as long as you ain't hurting
for any
anybody.
reason. And if I want to be armed, as long as I'm within that state law or federal law, then that same argument, I make that same argument with that too. It's like, okay, I can be anywhere in this country with my firearm as long as it's legal, and I don't got to tell you why. Because this is America. You can do that. I can. You know what? I want to be in Florida tomorrow. I'm going to take my gun with me. Legal. Okay. I don't need to explain to you why I did it. Now, I'm not too clear on the state's laws over there, so I'm not really sure. I can't give an opinion on that. Now, if it was illegal for him to have it based off of his age and the situation, then hey, those are the laws in the books. But simply on the situation itself, the actual incident, it is self-defense. Why he was there, I mean, that really doesn't matter. That has no bearing on the case. He was there. This is America. He wanted to be there. Okay. As far as criminally, it holds no bearing on the criminal case. He was there to go protect businesses. And for whatever reason, he got separated. You guys may have more information on that part than I do, but for some reason he got separated and he got identified by the crowd and starts being attacked. And I forget the sequence of things. I know, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, the first incident was the one in the parking lot where that one guy was shot in the head. Yeah,
the bullet grazed the side of his head. From what I've been reading, I'd have to go back and double check, but there was another shot that was fired.
I think he got 2 shots in the back from his side. Somebody was trying to shoot at Kyle.
Yeah,
that's
but
why
it wasn't
that's
Kyle.
the reason. That's the reason Kyle turned around.
It kind of set the catalyst to everything else that kind of unfolded. So then the second incident,
that's when in his mind he's like, oh shit, time for running's over. I need to turn around and defend myself. I'm being shot at now.
And as he's running down the street, he's not bothering anybody. They're chasing him, and then the next thing we see that he gets tripped up by somebody else. You see a gentleman come in with a skateboard, hits him. Kyle turns over, shoots him right in the chest. He's dead, And then the next guy that you see coming in that's fixing to hit him or kick him, Kyle then responded and shot him in the arm, which the gentleman that was shot in the arm had a pistol. We also find out later that all 3 of them have got criminal records. Now, the one with the pistol has actually, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have been a convicted criminal and you're in possession of a firearm, is that not considered a felony?
Yeah, I think he was already convicted of a felony.
Or already convicted as a felony, and you can't have a firearm?
Wasn't supposed to have.
Yeah, you have to be a convicted felon.
That's what it was, yes.
Certain crimes like domestic violence is one of those.
Right, yes.
It's not necessarily a felony, but given the crime, you're not allowed to have a weapon.
Which ironically is kind of a violation of the Second Amendment rights of bearing arms, but I kind of get it at the same time.
Well, yeah, but I was just kind of replaying the sequence of events. But here's the part where everybody seems to lose themselves, is the fact that they seem to think that this is, a white guy who got away with murder, because if you go back and watch the video, you see Kyle approaching the police that are coming his way. Now, where this gets lost in translation is that the cops don't know what's going on. They just see this kid walking up with a gun, and he's got his hands up,
And everybody's screaming, he just shot somebody, he just killed somebody.
Yeah, but again, the cops didn't know what was going on, so they didn't take him immediately, into custody.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I'm saying is you got a guy that's approaching the police. He is running towards the police. He is wanting to get out of this situation because he didn't want to hurt anybody else. And I think that's what we're losing here is the purpose of what he was doing. Yeah, I mean, if you ran into a situation like that where you see somebody coming at you with their hands up and they've got a weapon that's around their shoulder, clearly they don't want to shoot anybody. I mean, and if you didn't know what was going on, how would you handle that? Just out of curiosity.
From what I understand, they've been hearing gunshots pretty much throughout the protest. I mean, I imagine so. They were in these armored personnel carriers, not really getting out. I'm sure they were aware of what was going on around them, but it's hard to differentiate, gunshots, and there's so much chaos going on that they probably didn't know. Like you said, they didn't know what was going on.
Right.
And now if they're yelling like, "Hey, someone was shot," or "Someone just shot, he just killed somebody," that tells me nothing. In a sea of, I don't know how many people were there, hundreds or thousands of people. Like,
that could be anybody.
Who's he? Yeah, that could be anyone. And from what I understand, they've made contact with Kyle and his group earlier, so they were aware of him and his group being in the area and what they were doing.
Right.
And I've been to protests where Second Amendment, pro Second Amendment people will come out with rifles, this and that. Now, we do have to be aware because it's like, well, they say they're pro Second Amendment, but I also don't know if they're here to slaughter the opposing, protesters or whatever. I mean, because that's anytime I see a large group like that, I think terrorist attack. Like, hey, somebody can just come in here and ram a car right through all these people, or just open fire into this crowd. Whether you agree with their politics or not, or what they're protesting, we're there for the safety of everybody. So we're going to watch those guys just as much as we're going to watch anybody else in the crowd.
Until your local mayor,
rights, obviously.
Until your local mayor comes and tells you to stand down. Yeah,
and we're going to respect their rights. I mean, yeah, they can open carry and all that, but we're also going to be aware. So I don't know, man. That's a hard answer to give. I think he was eventually taken into custody. I would have taken him into custody. Immediately and questioned him. From what I understand, that officers ran past him, and then he was taken into custody behind the police line. Yeah. Which to me makes a lot of sense, because you want to get officers on the other side of him to face any other potential threats, while what we call an arresting team comes in behind that wall of officers and deals with the arrest or taking somebody into custody. And if somebody's not resisting, somebody's not actively, fighting or reaching for a weapon, there's no need to slam somebody to the ground. There's no need to forcefully put handcuffs on somebody. I've taken rifles and weapons off of people who are completely compliant, and there's no issue. I've been on traffic stops where I can see the gun tucked in right next to the dude's car seat, and I go on, telling him why I stopped him. I'm watching the hands, obviously, and I'm ready to pull out my weapon if he even thinks about, reaching for that weapon. And I'll tell him like, hey man, I'm going to go back to my car. I see your weapon. Don't reach for it. You don't reach for yours, I won't reach for mine. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that comes from reading that person. If I can read them and a part of me tells me this person is not a threat, and it's hard to explain that because it's almost like this sixth sense type of thing.
There's no rule book on body language. No. There's no descriptive manual you can go to.
Nothing's telling me that this person is trying to hurt me. But I let them know, like, hey, I see the weapon. Don't reach for it, and I won't reach for mine. I'm gonna go back to my car, and I'm gonna do my thing, and then I'll come back. Okay. Like, all right, yeah, sure. And I came back, and the weapon was gone. He had put it somewhere, and because I could tell he was nervous. He's like, "Oh crap! I didn't even realize it was there." You can tell it was one of those things. He was pulled over for the first time with a weapon in his car. He was a concealed handgun license holder, and I just told him, like, "Hey man, next time, you either put it away before the officer shows up, so that way hey, put it in your glove box and hands on the steering wheel, let him know, hey, I got a weapon here, blah blah. That's fine. I'm not going to pull you out. I'm not going to yank you out of the car. it's actually safer that you stay in there, because I can move around out here and get a better angle and get away from you, and it makes it harder for you to shoot me. Then now I got you out of the car and we're fighting. So yeah, I mean, I've taken weapons off of people who are completely compliant. Like, hey man, I'm gonna reach for this gun.
The first officer,
I'm gonna disarm you for a second to go ahead.
So the first, I'm still back on the picturing these officers, the frontline officers with Kyle Rittenhouse, sees him with his hands up. They go on by, the officers behind them write the ticket or take him into custody, and then I just pictured a whole army of people with ticket books data collecting.
Hey, just before we go and we wrap up with this interview with you, what would you tell civilians that have maybe a negative thought on the police with everything currently going on right now? What would you tell them to kind of maybe de-escalate certain situations that we're seeing?
I would say don't assume anything. Just like, if you have questions, a lot of that is going to get answered. Understand that the officers are dealing with a dynamic situation. They have more information than you probably do, and explaining things to you is going to take away from precious time when they have to deal with a certain situation. Yeah. And I think that's the hardest part for I say civilians, for citizens to understand, because I've done it myself. I'm out looking for a violent suspect, and I think I have somebody who kind of matches the description, or a car that is similar in description, and I stop them, and I'm like, I'm at the car and like, hey, what's that license plate? Or I have a truck that matches that description. What's that license plate, or what's this person's name? And I walk up and I can tell, we're looking for Hispanic male, and I pull up and it's it's a black male or it's a female. And as soon as I know that, like, oh, hey, I'm sorry, we're looking for somebody. You're free to go. I haven't explained anything. I haven't explained the full extent of the stop, but the severity and the exigency is I need to find this person quick. I'm obviously operating within the law and the Fourth Amendment to stop and detain somebody, but I've stopped people and they're like, oh, what's going on, and there is no time to explain it. Like, hey, I need you to move over here for a second. I detain you for a minute until we figure out whether you're the guy or not the guy, or whether you're the victim that I'm looking for, because I got a call about somebody being shot. Are you okay? And people get freaked out, and sometimes we can't give that information right then and there because I don't have time to explain this whole story, and that's frustrating. I get it, because I want this person to calm down as best I can. So it's just a constant reassuring, like, hey, just I'll tell you what's going on. Just give me a second. I need this compliance first for both of us to be safe. And then once the situation's safe, I know that you don't have any weapons, or I figure out who I have, who I don't have. Then I can apologize because we're looking for somebody else, or I can explain to you the story of like, hey, I need y'all to come over here because there's a shooting going on the other side of this street actively happening, or there's a barricaded person. We need everybody to stay clear of the area, or whatever. Man, I don't know, man. I guess perspective, a lot of understanding and perspective. And I know that goes both ways. A lot of officers do work towards that more often than they think. I tell people to place themselves in that officer's shoes. Like, here's your badge, here's your gun, here's your vest. Now go handle this situation. Go handle this domestic. Go handle this. How would you show up? People like to think, oh, these, cops are this. They should know every ninja move and every tactical move there is in the book. But
kind of put you a little bit on a pedestal.
Situation.
All right, man. Hey, I want to thank you for coming on and giving us this different perspective. And there's a couple things you said in here I've learned from that never even crossed my mind. And I hope that
same here.
I hope that maybe when people watch or listen to this, that maybe they can take a second when they see the next news clip come out that's designed specifically to get an emotional reaction out of you, that maybe they'll take a second and recognize there are different perspectives at play. There are different sides with different sets of information. There is a reason why we're not seeing the whole video. Just take a second and think. Anthony talks about the 10-second rule. I tell you, wait, Dan Bongino tells you 48 hours, at least wait 48 hours before jumping to conclusions. Just take your time and let the facts come out. and then react accordingly, but
if I could add a little bit more to what feeding off what you just said, if I can add more to my answer to Anthony, I was actually on a podcast with a Black group called Black Table, and they talk on Black issues and police and stuff like that. And so I have one of the guys is a friend of mine, and they had me on the show, and they asked me that same question at the end: what would I tell people? And on their show, specifically Black people and the Black community. And my answer to that, feeding off of what you just said, was think about the story and ask yourself, is this designed to fuel my emotion or fuel my anger? Because I definitely feel that a lot in a lot of the stories, that it's very much designed to get a certain reaction out of the Black community or just Americans in general. And if you feel that strong emotion, that anger of like, a certain person was wronged or whatever, let that emotion hit you, because I don't want to tell people to deny emotion. That is very a real, emotions are real, and, they're legitimate because you're being told, hey, look, this injustice. Well, then, yeah, anybody would be angry at that. But let that emotion hit you, let it wash over you, let it pass, and then think, okay, is this story manipulating me? Is it manipulating my emotions? And then figure out the facts, because I feel like a lot of people are being played. I feel we're all being played. Emotions, people are being manipulated. And when I say people, it's just Americans in general on both sides. They want to sensationalize things on either end. They're like, all cops are bastards. And then, I also see the media cater to the right wing side of like, these thugs and this and that, and you should support your police 100% because that's the American thing to do.
Yep.
It's like, well,
it goes both ways.
Well, hang on.
It goes both
well,
ways.
That's also dangerous too, because you can't just give 100% confidence to the state. That's just, there's a reason our forefathers did what they did, because you can't trust, man. That's why we have checks and balances, and, and so I don't know, just take, like you said, take a moment to think, am I being manipulated? And if you do feel those strong emotions of hate or whatever because of the story, let it hit you. That's fine. Process the emotions and then stop and then process the facts. Because I really do feel like we're being played, where a lot of emotions are being manipulated here. And I think that's dangerous. That pisses me off. I think direct your anger at the media for trying to manipulate you because they think you're so stupid that, hey, we show you these flashes or these images that, just like a, trained animal, you're going to get mad. They know that. They know how to make the Black community angry. We're going to show them a story of a Black male or a Black person get, shot or whatever, and then we're going to leave out information just to fuel your anger. Like that's a slap in the face to the Black community. They think that you're so stupid that, hey, we just dangle these few images, leave out important information, and then we got you. We know exactly how to play you like a fiddle. Like that's insulting.
All right.
Well, Andy, we appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us, and just be safe out there, and we'll check in on on you from time to time, and of course we interact with each other quite a bit on social media. But just be safe, man, and we're always thinking about you and anybody that, in the blue. So, especially for me, I support law enforcement. There's a few bad apples, but not everybody is. So,
I appreciate that, guys. I'm glad to be on, and I'm happy to be on again if y'all want to do this again.
All righty. Well, you've been watching another episode of the Unframe of Mind show. This has been yet another uncomfortable conversation without a condom. And if you guys want to, if you can, click the link. Subscribe, man.
Subscribe.
We're actually in the process of trying to reach 1,000 on YouTube, and we've got a Discord community we're trying to reach 100 in. That's our next couple milestones. So
we're slowly making that transition off of the big platform.
Be sure to check out our social medias and whatnot over on unframeofmind.com. All of our information is there. And I would say if you want to reach out to Andy to ask me any questions, probably the best way to do that is to contact us first, and then we will pass along the message and let him act accordingly. Yeah. So until next time, y'all have a good evening. Peace out.
See you.
All right, guys, real quick update before I wrap up this episode. We got so busy talking, and the flow of the conversation was just going so smooth that we completely forgot to finish up the story So the suspect that Andy was in the middle of trying to make a determination of whether or not he should pull the trigger or not, as it turns out, later it was actually a box cutter he was pulling out of his pocket and then holding up that box cutter as if it were some kind of a gun. Also, what made this incredibly challenging for all parties involved is that the original victim would not cooperate with the police and would not admit whether or not the suspect in question was in fact the guy that robbed or tried to rob him at quote-unquote gunpoint. Likely, it's suspected is that because he was too embarrassed once he found out that it was not actually a gun that was being pointed at him, that he got tricked into thinking that a box cutter was a gun. Now, all other details aside, that's what we got so far out of that story. I just wanted to make sure to wrap that up with you guys. Just keep in mind, it always does boil down to a he said, she said, and when you have multiple parties involved, it becomes incredibly complicated. So I just wanted to make sure to wrap up that little bit for you so you weren't left hanging out there wondering, was that actually the guy? Well, it turns out they think so, but they don't really know. Thanks again for watching the Unframe of Mind show. I absolutely love that you guys can find value in these conversations, and I really, really hope that you guys can take away a little something from Andy's perspective. There is so much value in speaking with everybody from all sides of a particular debate or a situation, and this is no different. Everybody has a different story, so let me know what you thought in the comments below. Until next time.